go to
and she's
Tennessee.
going to Idaho.
I know.
Yes, I'm going
such
north.
a nice place.
Oh, my goodness. That'll be so much fun.
Lots of snow. My son will get to play in it for the first time, so I'm very excited.
That's great. That is so great. And so we are so excited you just decided to join us today for Point of View, and we have got a packed show for you today. We've got so much going on. So we'll spend it in the first hour. We've got Jim Paris on with us to talk about everything that is Bitcoin. And so for those that are curious or those that are have so many questions but don't necessarily know the answers, we will have and be talking with him about Bitcoin and all that it is. And then in the second hour, we've got quite a bit of show to talk about. Is Twitter banning free speech? How about the CDC? Are they banning particular words? 5 ways President Trump's national security strategy is different than President Obama's. And then the looming question, since this is the Millennial Roundtable, is, do you have selfie-itis? And so with the average millennial taking 25,000 selfies in their lifetime, it begs the question, do you have selfie-itis? But nevertheless, there is a much bigger question that is on the table. And what is Bitcoin? Everything about it. And so we've got Jim Paris on the line. Jim, are you there?
I'm here, and I'm wondering how did two old guys like Kerby and I get on a Millennial Roundtable?
I don't know. Apparently, your selfies came through well, and so judging by the criteria of your ability to take a selfie, we deemed you important and significant enough to come onto the show to tell us about Bitcoin.
Let me,
if
I can,
good to be with you, Nick.
Jim, let me kind of set the stage. You know, a number of months ago, anybody that listens to this program noticed that in light of all the things we talked about, because, of course, he's with ChristianMoney.com, you suggested that people might want to just buy $100 of Bitcoin, set it aside, because if it does really well, then that would be another way that somebody, without investing a lot of time, energy, or money, could actually begin to see some success, and that might be something that would be a wise, a possible investment. If not, if it's a risky one, well, nothing lost, nothing gained. And since this time, Jim, of course, we've had all sorts of people that have said, okay, I'll spend $100 or $500 or whatever people do, and they've noticed that the price has gone up rather dramatically. And so that's why a lot of people have asked a whole series of questions about this, and so we wanted to dedicate some of our time today. We did have Jerry Tuma on Friday, and he was saying, you know, it also shows some of the evidence of being a bubble. So I just thought, if nothing else, Nick, you have certainly studied this as well, and certainly Jim Paris has. So I'd love to give the two of you a chance to kind of talk about Bitcoin for a few minutes.
And Jim, I hope you're ready, because I've got a significant amount of questions. But before I get started with my questions, I want to be able to tell our listeners that if you want to call in and ask some of your questions about Bitcoin to the man, Jim Paris, you can do that at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212. And for those of you that are tuning in on Facebook right now, I'm sorry that you have to see my face, but you also have an opportunity to be able to share a comment as well as a question, and we'll get to that on air as well. And so, Jim, now that we know that there are individuals that are listening and they know the number to call, let me lead off with the question. What is Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin, which is sort of the one currency, and there are 1,100 different cryptocurrencies.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times we just say Bitcoin, and it sort of represents this entire new niche of internet money or private money or digital money, as it's called. So what we're talking about, the way I like to explain it to people, it's kind of like combining 3 things, like a traditional bank account, a credit card, and an email account. All in one thing. And it's a way to be able to send money on an instantaneous basis to anyone else in the world without dealing with a bank being in the middle of that or a credit card being in the middle of that. And so here's the problem that we have with this whole new cryptocurrency world. Some people see what has happened, which is the internet has yet changed another thing, which is money. But there are still people today that prefer a phone book versus doing a Google search. And that's fine. You know, I'm not going to try to change that person's mind. We have people we call late adopters that don't get to these things until the trend has already been established. We're still in the very early adoption phase of cryptocurrency. So right now, a typical person at the water cooler, at the coffee shop is going to say, that crazy internet money, I'm never doing that. They were the same people that said, I'll never have a website, I'll never have a Facebook, I'll never have a computer that goes online. Why would anyone want a computer in their house? That's something you use at work. Those are the same kinds of things translate them to today. But this is a complete game changer. People in traditional finance don't understand it, and they don't like it because it competes with them. So if you go to a financial planner, a banker, a typical money manager, these people will say it's a bubble, stay away from it, it's never going to really last, it's just a phase we're going through, because this puts them ostensibly largely out of business. So what's happening, I'll say one more quick thing. Bank of America just got a patent last week. This will show your listeners how big this is. Bank of America just got a patent approved last week to be able to allow people to deposit cryptocurrency in their Bank of America bank account. This is not going anywhere. Everyone is now changing to adapt to this, including the banks, the credit card industry, the financial industry, which is now waiting in line in droves to set up Bitcoin, different mutual funds, and now the futures exchanges are trading Bitcoin. This is not stopping. I mean, this is like trying to stop the ocean with a spoon. If you think you're gonna stop this, this is a brand new thing. I get it. I know that for a lot of people, they can't wrap their brain around it. Here's my experience quickly. $12 per Bitcoin back in 2012. I put in $20, and that $20 is worth over $20,000 today.
Wow.
Somebody that put $100 in Bitcoin in 2010 would today have over $250 million from $100. This is a radical new way of looking at money, and I'm not saying sell your house and put it in there, mortgage your house, sell all your investments. I have been very conservative. I've told people, put in what you can lose. Put in 100, put in 200. And I've had I was on Point of View a few months ago, so many emails from people that said, I put in that 100 and now it's $700 or $800. I should have put in more. And, my view is don't put in any more than you can lose. But this is just an incredible thing that's happening. People know me. I've been writing and talking about finances since, going back more than 30 years, 30 books, all of that, radio show. So I don't just jump on bandwagons. This is real.
And we've got to jump on one of those bandwagons known as a commercial break. And so we are going to be right back after this. So we've got James Paris with us, Jim Paris, and we're going to be back with him, and we're going to be taking some of your phone calls as well as answering some of your comments that you've posted on Facebook. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
It is estimated that Charles Wesley wrote over 6,500 hymns. Perhaps his best-known hymn is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Over the years, it has been edited slightly, but the meaning and theology remains as he wrote it more than 2 centuries ago. It begins with a proclamation of the birth of Jesus. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. The hymn reminds us why Christ came to earth. Jesus came into the world to bring peace, but many who sing this song fail to realize that it was to bring peace between us and God. Wesley's hymn reminds us that his birth was so that God and sinners could be reconciled. We are the sinners in this hymn, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have broken God's commandments and need to be reconciled with God. This was done when Christ died for our sins. This hymn by Charles Wesley goes on to describe who Jesus Christ is. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time behold him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with men to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. This is the wonder of the incarnation. Jesus became the offspring of the Virgin's womb. God became man and was veiled in flesh, even though he was the incarnate deity. This Christmas week, let us all once again reflect upon the incarnation, how wonderful yet mysterious that God would become man and dwell among us, and that he would be willing to die on a cross for our sins. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable today by Kerby Anderson as well as Chelsey Youman here. And so we also have online Jim Paris. And so Jim is the founder of ChristianMoney.com. He's the editor-in-chief, and he has been talking to us a little bit about Bitcoin. And so we spent the first segment trying to wrap our minds around what is Bitcoin. But we also wanted you to know that we're going to be taking your questions. Now that we're all operating from a definitional level playing field, we know what Bitcoin is. We're going to be taking your questions. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Or, since this is the Millennial Roundtable, we are some millennials, some Snapchatting, Uber riding, selfie taking millennials. You can go ahead and log on to Facebook as well at facebook.com/pointofviewradio and to share your comment or ask a question online, and we'll be sure to air that as well. And so, Jim, my second question that I've got that I'm just very interested in, what's the backing behind it? So if I think about if it's a currency, and I guess you can go back and forth. Is it really a currency or is it more of a commodity? If it's a currency, what's backing Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, all right. First of all, money is simply if a group of people get together and decide they will accept it as a means of exchange, then it's money.
Okay.
And so there's a huge, millions and millions of people that agree to accept Bitcoin as payment between each other. So that makes it a currency. Now, secondly, you of course have each one of these cryptocurrencies. They're all unique. They're all different, have different features and options available. But the software technology, the blockchain, and all the different variations, this is where the value really lies in each one of these currencies. Now, some people say, I'm not getting in it until the government backs it. That'll never happen. This is in competition with the government. That's what people don't get. The dollar isn't backed by anything either. And the dollar is a completely fiat currency. So people say, no, it's not. The U.S. dollar, it's backed by the government. No, it's not. We haven't had a gold standard. There are no assets behind the dollar. If the dollar is backed by anyone, I want to know where I can go to get, 60% of my spending power back that I've lost since I've been, a working adult. The dollar isn't backed by anyone. It's just simply a piece of paper that everyone has agreed to accept as a common means of exchange. That's what a currency is. Bitcoin, I would argue, is a currency, but it also probably is a commodity. It trades as a commodity, especially in these early days of it because of the value. And there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever created.
Yeah.
That's what makes Bitcoin especially unique is the finite supply. And that's why it's going up so much and will continue to go up so much.
So help me understand, is there a difference to be made between the technology behind Bitcoin and the actual Bitcoin? And is the value, if there is a difference, is the value in the technology like blockchain, which just kind of undergirds the cryptocurrency, or is the value in the actual coin?
Yeah, so the value is in the blockchain.
Okay.
And the blockchain and the coin are really all in one. Now, what's interesting is recently we've had some feuds within the Bitcoin development community.
Yeah.
So one group said, "Hey, we want to make some changes to how the blockchain works," and the other group said, "No, we're not going to go along with that." So the group that wanted to make changes, they split off, and they created something called Bitcoin Cash, which is a different variation of Bitcoin, and everyone that owned Bitcoin got an equal amount of Bitcoin Cash at no cost. So I woke up today and had thousands of dollars in my account that was not in there yesterday because I got this free dividend, which actually was paid out 3 or 4 months ago, but didn't actually reflect in a lot of our accounts.
It's
until
strange. I woke
the
up
end of
today
the
with
year
a
here.
word from God that said that you needed to give me some money.
God works in mysterious ways. So in any case, there's no 100% agreement on how all of this is supposed to work. The blockchain is sort of a generic foundation that all of these different currencies. I teach an online class on this. The reason I did it, so many people ask me, they want to take me to coffee, they want to buy me dinner, they want to buy me a car and drive me around in it so they can ask me questions. So I said, okay, I give up. I can't answer all the emails anymore. So I set up a little online class where I teach people about this. But one of the keys is to look beyond Bitcoin. For example, my favorite cryptocurrency of all of them is something called Ripple XRP, which I've been buying for about 5 years and is presently only 77 cents, but I believe could be the next Bitcoin. So what I've done is, as I've made more and more money with my Bitcoin, I've taken the profits, I call it profit rolling, and I've spread it out into a lot of these smaller ones, thinking like, well, what could $100 be worth? Well, if this is the 2010 Bitcoin window now in 2017, for example, for say a Ripple, that $100 could be worth millions of dollars. That's what's exciting about this, is a tiny, tiny amount of money can really pay off in thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars.
Okay, so here's another question that we've got, and I'm going to, because this is something especially when I talk to my grandparents as well as just other individuals that are relatively new, it would be very interesting, and we're going to send it out to Raymond. So Raymond in California, are you there? Raymond, are you there?
Hello?
Hey, Raymond, you had a question?
Yes. The fact that there is a $21 million cap out that can only be mined, does that make it more pressure, finite?
Thanks so much for your question.
Yeah. Right. There's 21 million coins that can ever be created. And what mining is, what he's talking about is, how does a new cryptocurrency get into people's hands for the first time? How does it actually get circulated? Well, in the case of Bitcoin, it's done through a process called mining, which what they do is they say, connect your computer to our network, let us use some of your computer power, and we will then pay you back in our cryptocurrency. So that's how they get it out to the first adopters of it. Now it's become such a big deal. This is crazy, but literally entire countries like North Korea has set up like giant farms of computers. I mean, we're talking about square acreage of computers to try to get Bitcoin. They're doing it in Russia. It's incredible, people using these giant computer farms to try to get more Bitcoin, but there's not much left. And in the next about 9 or 10 years, all of the new Bitcoin that's to be given away will have been given away, but the maximum number of coins is 21 million. That's why Wall Street and so many people are putting money into it, because everybody's going to want this at some point, and there's only 21 million coins that will ever be created.
Jim, this is Kerby. I just thought I'd ask the question. Since you mentioned North Korea, that raises the question I've heard. There's some Christians that say, look, I'm not going to get involved because it's too risky, or there's scam and I don't want to lose that. But some say, Bitcoin, it's being used by North Korea, it's being used by Russia. Let's talk about some others. It's being used sometimes by drug dealers, by the mafia.
Yes.
You've heard that before. That's one of the concerns, because obviously some people use Bitcoin and that they're not actually in line with our Christian values. Of course, those same groups also use money and dollars and yen and all sorts of other things. But how do you respond to that particular question?
Yeah, that is a concern, and I share that concern, and I don't want to just be, dismissive of that. But here's the reality. The U.S. dollar is used for all of those same nefarious activities as well. So the other thing, too, is I look at it as a technology, just like the Internet. Back in the early days of the Internet, it was primarily the big drivers of the Internet were pornography and gambling. So a lot of Christians said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be on the Internet because these are the two big things that are driving the Internet. Well, then ministries got involved and started broadcasting video and audio and having websites and all these great, conservative sites. So my view is this is a technology that's neutral and can be used for good, and certainly is and can be used for bad. So that's kind of my response to that. Some Christians still say, nope, not touching it with a 10-foot pole. And, I'm not really trying to convince anybody to adopt this as much as I am to help those that want to adopt it to understand it.
That's great. That's great. And so we've got Jim Paris on the line, and Jim is the editor-in-chief of ChristianMoney.com. So if you're interested in learning more about his background as well as just some of the stuff that he's written on Bitcoin, you can go to that, ChristianMoney.com. And then we're going to be coming up to a break here in a little bit. And so we also want to remind you of some other resources that you can avail yourself of to better learn more about Bitcoin, as well as some other material that we'll be talking about later on today in the show. You can go to pointofview.net to be able to see more about Jim, as well as see more about the Bitcoin that we've been talking about, as well as maybe have some of your questions that are answered through some of the resources that are available on that website. Another one of those websites is facebook.com/pointofviewradio, where you can listen in as well as share your comments or your questions on the Facebook page at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We're going to continue getting to your questions because when we come back from the break, one of the looming questions is Bitcoin safe? Can it be hacked? And if so, could I lose my money by placing it in there? So when we get back, Jim's going to answer that question. But we also want to remind you that you can call in as well, that old-fashioned phone thing that you used to send text messages on. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number's 800-351-1212, and we'll be back right after this.
Taylor has been listening to Point of View Radio for about 12 years, which is pretty remarkable considering today he's only 25.
In high school, when I first became aware of the political spectrum and all that, I was a conservative ideologue, basically, going with whatever conservatives said. But after listening to the show over the years, I've realized that I'm supposed to be for truth. I'm supposed to be a Christian and then a conservative. And I'm supposed to look at all this that's going on around us in today's culture through a biblical lens. And I can't thank y'all enough for that.
The you Taylor is thanking is you. People like you are the heroes who have patiently invested in Point of View Radio and made it possible to shape hearts and minds across the nation, which in the long run helps to shape our future. And you can be twice the hero today because we have a matching challenge which doubles your investment dollar for dollar up to at least $45,000. But you have to act. Please give at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Your $50 gift means $100 to us. Any amount doubles. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View on this December 20th, 2017 day. And for those of you that are paying attention, it's Happy Caroling Day. And so instead of me singing Christmas carols to you, I thought we would just talk more about Bitcoin, which might be music to some of your ears if you were an early adopter to it. We've got on the phone, we've got Jim Paris, who is the editor-in-chief of ChristianMoney.com. And then since it's the Millennial Roundtable, we've also got around the roundtable, Chelsey Youman of First Liberty Institute, as well as Kerby Anderson. And so we are so grateful that you've decided to tune in. And so we're going to be taking some of your phone calls. And then also we're going to be taking some of your questions and comments from Facebook.com/pointofviewradio. So if you'd like to call in, you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can go online, Facebook.com/pointofviewradio to be able to share one of your comments or questions. And just to show you that we are taking your questions and comments on Facebook.com, Jim, we have one from the Facebooks.coms. I hear a couple of people are on that thing, 2 billion people. But
I think it's going to take off. What do you think?
I think there's something to it. And so one of those questions is it safe? Jim, because we've heard so much about, hacking's always in the news today. We read in the Washington Post a month ago that North Korea has an army of hackers numbering upwards of 4 million people. And then you talk about how there's these Bitcoin farms, right, in North Korea. Is this a safe currency? If I were to invest in this, is somebody just going to take it away from me?
Yeah, so here's the thing that people don't understand, and this is kind of where you get like water cooler talk where I'm never going to put my money in that because someone can just take it from me if they hack me. So Bitcoin itself has never been hacked. And I don't think it's really possible to hack the actual currency because of the blockchain technology, which is sort of like a giant puzzle, and one piece secures the next piece, which secures the next piece. So it's not Bitcoin itself that has ever been at risk or it has ever been hacked. It is the different online accounts that people have to hold their Bitcoin. Now, there's a really easy solution to this, but I will tell you there are a lot of scams. That's why I started doing this online class to try to show people what a scam was versus legitimately how to keep your Bitcoin safe. So let me tell you how this would work. If you set up what's called a desktop wallet on a laptop computer and you keep that computer disconnected from the internet, the laws of physics would say there's no way anyone could hack you because that computer is not connected to the internet. So that's all of these coins have a software program that's free to download to hold the coin. If you have the coin on your own computer, then your own computer would have to be hacked. If you have your coin in an online account like Coinbase, which I love, but it's an online account, that means in theory it can be hacked. But most of these online services, they offer you like 2 or 3 levels of safety. So not only is there a password, but then there's usually a second and a third authentication of your password by either a text to your phone or something called Google Authenticator. So there's a lot of different measures. But what I have done is I actually have invested a little bit of money. So a little over $100, you can get what's called an offline wallet, which is it looks like a little mini external hard drive, which you can then put your coins on that. And then they're not on the internet at all. And there's a secret special method where you can actually, even if you lost that wallet, you can restore it to another wallet if you have your secret phrases written down somewhere and saved. So I don't want to get too technical, but I will tell people that there are ways that are not too complicated of storing it where you could absolutely, it would be impossible to ever be hacked. But you won't hear people say that too much because it's a lot easier to just say, I'm not doing that because somebody could just hack me. So you could be hacked if you're keeping it all online, but that's probably not the way to do it.
That's good. That's good. We're going to keep on taking some phone calls. We've got Gary from Arizona. Is you there?
Yes, I am.
Gary in Arizona, you're live. What's your point of view or your question?
I want to know who is the one that put it in stone that there's only going to be 21 million ever put out of the Bitcoin, and if I might ask, who is the governing body of the Bitcoin?
That's great questions.
Those are two fantastic questions. First of all, there is no governing body. It is a decentralized currency, which is sort of the point behind cryptocurrency, which is that there is no middleman. If I want to send Nick $1 million in Bitcoin today, I just need to get Nick's address to his Bitcoin wallet.
That number is
$1 million. There's no middleman. So there is no one in the middle. So here's though how this works. In the beginning, and we still don't really know who created Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto, which is we believe to be a pen name, and not a real name, but maybe it was. We don't know. But the way that the program is created, there cannot be more than 21 million coins. Now, I'm not a computer programmer. In fact, the hottest degree, if you want to send your kid to college today, is cryptography, which is creating currency. This is a degree now. You get cryptography to learn how to do this. But the program itself makes it impossible to create any more than 21 million coins. It is the program itself. That cannot be changed. From everything, all the experts I have heard, that is written in stone by the original creator.
Wow. We're going to keep on taking some phone calls. We've got Bruce in South Carolina. Bruce, are you there?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. And you just answered one of my questions, although, to be honest with you, human beings can override computer programs so that the amount could be increased. So I guess I have to go to some backup questions. What happens to the value of the Bitcoin when this ceiling is reached? That's one. And as I understand it, then it's not a tangible asset. In other words, I can't actually hold a Bitcoin in denominations in my hand. Is that correct?
Right. You cannot physically hold a Bitcoin. It is the same idea as a money wire. It is a digital asset. Now, what happens when it reaches the cap? That's a great question. I'm a guy, in the last 6 months, I have literally transitioned to doing this as my full-time living, teaching and trading my own account on cryptocurrency. It just becomes so time-consuming. So I sit here all day, maybe 8-9 hours a day reading and hearing what other people are saying. So here's the deal. A number of mathematical calculations have been used to take just the current demand curve without assuming any spike in that growth rate, just the current demand curve projected out, say 3 to 5 years, with the limit of coins being reached in the next 8 to 10 years on Bitcoin. And people have been projecting for one Bitcoin a value of $1 million to $2 million for one Bitcoin. Now, I know that sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to me, but these are smart people using math to come to those figures. I'm not suggesting that there's any guarantee it will be that. I'm just saying, and I look at this and I say, man, I put in $20 that's worth over $20,000, and look at all this stuff that's happening. I mean, I was listening to CBS News, and on the news roundup now, they give you the Dow, the NASDAQ, and Bitcoin. I mean, this is it can't be ignored. It is here, and this whole notion of where the price goes is up for argument. But I think the answer is going to be a lot higher from here. What he said about any code that can be created can be changed, that is correct if one person has control of it. This is not able to be changed because of the fact that in order to change it, everybody involved would have to agree to that change. And that can't happen because of the way that it's set up. So I'm not a computer guy to give you the backup of that, other than to say that is an empirical fact that there cannot be more than 21 million coins. If anyone's super interested in researching that, they can kind of get into the weeds to look into that further.
So really, so we got a minute left before we go to a commercial break, and so maybe you want to talk about this more when we get back. So really, there's nothing behind it. It really is just some. You're buying a block of chain on the block, a block of code rather, on the blockchain, and you're part of the Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency that you have. So really, the value is simply what people are willing to pay for it. Correct?
Exactly. It's like any other currency. A group of people have agreed to consider it a means of exchange, and because there's a limited supply and there's a demand, and you have to look at the infrastructure. You've got, big names like Microsoft will let you pay in Bitcoin. Overstock.com. Some say Amazon will soon be taking Bitcoin. There are, thousands of Bitcoin ATMs now around the world. There are restaurants you can go into and pay in Bitcoin. So the adoption of it, the more people that accept it as a means of exchange, the more valuable that it becomes as a currency itself.
Well, we've got Jim, editor-in-chief of ChristianMoney.com with us, and he'll be back right after we get back from a commercial break. But I just let you know, I do accept Bitcoin, and so I am one of those entities that accept Bitcoin.
Give me your wallet, and we'll send you some just to get you started.
So if you have a question, you can call in at 800-351-1212 or go to Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio to get your question or comment, and we'll be back with Jim right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Washington Area Metropolitan Transit Authority, Metro for short, ferries commuters by rail and bus throughout the nation's capital. In addition to commuters, they also carry advertisements. And at Christmas time, those advertisements look very Christmassy. There are Christmas gifts pictured, lots of red and green, and not too few holiday puns designed to persuade you to buy stuff. The Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. also submitted an advertisement. It pictured a few shepherds and sheep under a starry sky with the message, "Find the perfect gift," scrolled artfully across the sky. At the website displayed in the ad, one finds out that the perfect gift is Jesus, quote, "the perfect gift of God's love this Christmas." But Metro rejected the ad. Macy's and other stores plying the Christmas theme were all right, but according to Metro, there are two halves at Christmas, the secular and the religious. Secular ads are okay, but all religious ads are forbidden. Yeah, Metro will take Santa, but not Jesus, 3 French hens, but not the 3 wise men. Even the president's own remarks at the recent national tree lighting could not appear on the side of a Metro bus. But that's not the law. First Liberty is submitting arguments to courts in Washington, D.C., explaining that what Metro is actually doing is called viewpoint discrimination and is a type of hostility towards religion that the First Amendment forbids. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, your host for Point of View today, the Millennial Roundtable. We've got Kerby Anderson as well as Chelsey Youman. That's First Liberty Institute. That's also here today. And we've got Jim Paris on the line. He is the editor-in-chief of ChristianMoney.com, and he's been talking to us about Bitcoin. And so, Jim, I've got a question just simply because this Bitcoin, it's been in the news and it fluctuates more than my weight around the holiday season. And so Chelsey's got a really great question about some of that fluctuation in the market.
Yes, and I'll be the first to admit, as my IT guy at work will attest to, that I'm pretty terrible at technology. I'm not fluent in it. But if this were hypothetically going to be kind of a tech bubble or we've heard rumors of something like that, what would be a telltale sign that it's time to get out, that it would be time to sell your Bitcoin?
Yeah. So one of the things that if you want to be a trader of Bitcoin, which is different than someone that just says, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to like hold it for 5 years. That's what most people do. They're just buy and hold. The same way they might buy a stock or a mutual fund. If you want to trade it, you really have to make a commitment to spending 2 or 3 hours a day following the news events. There was something that happened last night. I won't get into too much detail on it, but basically this new Bitcoin Cash that I mentioned in one of the earlier segments, the spin-off from Bitcoin, it actually became available on one of the biggest exchanges last night. And so what happened was a lot of people started moving money out of Bitcoin into this new version of Bitcoin. So this one was going up really fast. Bitcoin was coming down. But now Bitcoin has recovered from a large amount of that loss. But it's not unusual, Chelsey, for it to fluctuate over the course of a day or two by like 15% or 20% in value. That's really unusual for people to deal with because they don't see that in their stock or mutual fund account or their bank account. So that's why we suggest only put in money that you can lose. Just, totally, speculative. I've had people say, I'm not even going to put $100 in because I might lose it. Say, that's fine. Like, you could, instead of going out, to dinner a couple of times this month, put that money in. And it's money you would have spent anyway. And, maybe you would have had a couple of nice nights out. But what if, this is the biggest problem is we call it fear of missing out, FOMO.
Oh, I know.
We all have that here.
What if, I just tell people, what if one Bitcoin became worth $1 million and you remembered this day, December 20th, 2017, and you said, I remember hearing that guy on the radio. I posted something on my Facebook the other day. I said, someday you'll be able to tell your grandkids that you could have bought Bitcoin at $500 and have that story. Or you could be telling your grandkids that story on your private island. Well, you paid for their Harvard education. So those are kind of your two paths. But I would say fear of missing out. What if? And that's why I say, man, $100, $200. What if? And I spoke at a church 5 years ago, right after a couple contacted me who had invested in Bitcoin. They're one of the early adopters, and they made so much money. They paid off their home. They paid off all of their debts, and they still had like a seven-figure amount of Bitcoin value that they still had left. This was a few years ago. And I really felt like there was an opportunity here for Christians. And I get back to the whole stewardship idea. It's not about gambling. It's not about get rich quick. But I just say to myself, I believe we're in the last days. And I really believe that there's going to be a transfer of wealth to Christians in the last days so we can get the gospel out worldwide. And one of those things I feel is an opportunity is cryptocurrency. Maybe I'm going to be wrong in the end. I'm not saying this is a prophecy from God, but I just feel that this is an opportunity as Christian stewards that you just can't afford to not put something in it because who knows what's going to happen. I think it's going to be huge. I could be wrong, and you lose $100, but what would you lose if I'm right and you didn't put in the $100?
Yeah, that's like the classical Pascal formulation, right?
Yeah.
So
the wager, Pascal's wager, right there.
So let's go with lightning.
We've got a smart millennial here.
No. I'm not smart. I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So let's go lightning round with Facebook really quickly. So we've got Melissa that's from Facebook. She says, when you mine or use an app to mine, is it safe to deposit into your bank account?
Okay, you can't deposit cryptocurrency into your bank account yet.
Okay.
You can deposit it into a wallet, and there's many different wallets, online, offline, etc. So I hope that answers your question. By the way, mining, I don't mine, and I don't think mining makes sense for most people because of the cost right now of getting into it, the hardware cost. I think you're better off taking those thousands of dollars and just putting them in the coins instead of buying the equipment to get the coins. And I've run the numbers 9 ways to Sunday. Mining doesn't make sense for the average individual.
Continuing the lightning round, Kathleen from Facebook. What keeps someone or some country from buying all the Bitcoins?
Well, nothing. It's an open market, and it's between buyers and sellers. And the more people that buy, the higher the price goes up. There's a lot of people, though, that say they'll never sell their Bitcoin. So one of the mathematical calculations I was referring in the earlier segment to is somebody they have a figure that about 4 million Bitcoin have been lost. People who accidentally deleted their wallets and forgot their passwords or threw away their computer that they stored the Bitcoin on.
Yeah.
And then there's probably about 8 or 9 million Bitcoin that will never be sold, that people plan to keep that as a legacy holding in their family. So when you start running those numbers, there's not that many, maybe 8 or 9 million that are kind of up for grabs, and a country can buy them, anybody can buy them, and the more people that buy, the higher the price goes.
That's great. That's great. And we're going to take one more question, and we'll take it from the phone calls. So we've got Ginny from Georgia. Is that you?
Yes, it is.
Hey, Ginny, what's your question?
I had a two-part question. One is, can you convert Bitcoin into actual dollars? And the second part is, if you want to contribute to a charity, would they be able to accept it? And how would the IRS look at it as a contribution?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you can convert it into dollars. I do it all the time. I just bought a trip to Italy and Switzerland after converting some of my Bitcoin profits.
We get it, Jim. You're doing well. Just kidding.
So I'm just making sure that people know, because people say, "Oh yeah, but when will you ever be able to buy anything with it?" I buy stuff with it every day. So you can buy things directly with Bitcoin, or you can trade it in for dollars and move those dollars to your bank account. Can you contribute Bitcoin? Yes, it's considered a gift in kind. But the easier way to get the tax credit would be to just convert it to dollars, probably, and go ahead and contribute the dollars. But anything you make on Bitcoin is taxable. So if you buy it for $1 and you ended up selling it for $1 million, then you owe all that gain as a taxable gain. The IRS is really onto this now, and I'm sure they're listening to this radio show right now to make sure I pay my share as well.
We got one more question, Jim. Chelsea got it.
Yes, you mentioned something about Ripple, a different type of cryptocurrency. Why do you have your eye on that one in particular?
Yeah, so Ripple has been around for maybe about 5 or 6 years, and what makes Ripple different is they're integrated into the banking system. What they've done is really smart, which is instead of making it the banks versus cryptocurrency, they've gone in and created a cryptocurrency for the banks. And so it's a way that banking can have cryptocurrency and use it instead of wiring. And it's an incredible platform of technology. You could do some research on it, but it's called Ripple XRP. And I started buying it when you could get 3 or 4 for a penny. And it's right now at 77 cents. It's still cheap, though. I think it could really be the next Bitcoin. So in my online class, I'm kind of following and teaching on about 10 or 12 of these top ones, because it's not only about Bitcoin. There's also some of these others that are worth looking at that are still cheap.
Jim, thank you so much. Jim of ChristianMoney.com. Thank you so much for your time, and we are going to have to take one of those commercial breaks, but we'll be back right after this.
Today, you can make a difference, but you have to act. Recently, Kerby sat down with a couple in California, Stan and Jennifer. Jennifer said, like many Christians, they were concerned about the direction of the culture, but simply hoped something would change. On one of her regular walks through the neighborhood, listening to the radio, she happened to cross Point of View, and before long, she was convinced wishing things would change was not enough. She began taking what she was learning and applying it and sharing it. She even went to the state capitol in Sacramento to stand up for what she believes. You would be surprised how much difference one Jennifer can make, and how many Jennifers you can inspire by giving to Point of View. Your gift today will shape hearts and minds across the nation, helping to shape our future. And thanks to a surprise donor challenge, your gift will be doubled up to at least $45,000. Give today at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Answer the challenge. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because
of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View for the second hour on this December 20th, 2017 day. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable, since this is the Millennial Roundtable version of Point of View, by Chelsey Youman of First Liberty Institute. How are you, Chelsey?
I am well today.
So good, so good. And then we've also got Kerby Anderson's with us today. Da-da-da, you get music with you.
I got music on that one, too, and don't even know how that happened, but we're so busy eating cake, I guess maybe we made a mistake and pushed the wrong button.
So Kerby's wife has made some cake, and it is a reminder of God's goodness and grace in this very fallen world. Taste and see that the cake is good. Blessed is the person that eats the cake in this studio. And so we are so grateful you decided to join us this today for this December 20th Millennial Roundtable version. So in the first hour, if you didn't catch us, we talked about Bitcoin, and we had Jim Paris on from ChristianMoney.com, and we were answering some of your questions that you provided over the phone as well as on Facebook, and really did try to better understand just this thing called Bitcoin. What's the hubbub around it? Where's the value in it? Is this the future? Are we moving towards this cryptocurrency? Is this more of a currency or commodity? So if you missed that conversation, which I am highly biased, but I believe it was really good, you can go onto the website, pointofview.net, to be able to get that archived edition, or you can go onto Facebook as well, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And when you go onto Facebook.com, you'll be able to see the actual broadcast of the show. So unfortunately, you'll have to see my face, but fortunately, you'll get to see Chelsey's face. And so it balances out. So nevertheless, you can go onto Facebook.com/pointofviewradio to catch that first hour, or you can also share your questions and comments on the show. We'll be sure to air those at the appropriate time. But here during the second hour, we've got quite a bit. We're going to kind of center around the First Amendment. So for better or for worse, you've got the CDC and their banning of words. You've got Twitter is potentially banning free speech, taking away accounts. What are we to think of this? As well as this selfie-itis thing, taking selfies. And so should we be worried about all the selfies that are taking? So without further ado, we are going to jump right into it. So is the CDC banning words? The Department of Health and Human Services tried to play down a report that officials at the CDC, Center for Disease and Control and Prevention, have barred using 7 words or phrases, including science-based, fetus, transgender, vulnerable, in agency budget documents. This came out over the weekend. Specifically on Saturday, the Washington Post put out a huge report that kind of bent it towards the idea that it is potentially the Trump administration trying to ban these particular words from being utilized. Well, one of the fascinating things is, as you might expect, there are 2 sides to every story.
I would think so. Of course, we're going to talk about First Amendment. We have our First Amendment expert sitting around the table with us. She does make us look good, doesn't she?
She does.
She certainly does. But again, this may be a lot of explanations that maybe go a little bit further, maybe a lot of hue and cry that isn't justified, because, again, the Washington Post said that the Trump administration is prohibiting officials from using some of those words. Now, let's recognize as we get into this that, first of all, we're not talking about the entire administration. We're not talking about the entire Department of Health and Human Services. We're talking about something that was developed in a meeting with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And what it was just on the budget documents, we might not want to use some words that might cause Republicans in the House to overreact to it. It's not exactly the best story in the world, but it has nothing to do with the Trump administration. These were lower-level bureaucrats, I think, in some cases, that have been around since probably Bush, Obama, now Trump. And second of all, it only had to do with how, as we ask for our budget request, which words are going to be more effective in terms of making sure that we get our funding. So it's not exactly the big story that the Washington Post made it sound like over the weekend.
I think that was one of the fascinating things, right, Chelsey?
Right. The article talked about two components of this, which I think is so important to note. The first being that the CDC published what they called a style guide, and it included everything from grammatical do's and don'ts to just general good writing suggestions so that they would be able to more efficiently read and review and understand what the budget proposal was actually saying, and to get away from maybe overly used terms or terms that the definitions and meanings maybe have been conflated over time. And so that's kind of a really important, valid thing to note, I would think. But the second being, and this is what Kerby, you alluded to, which is that this is the careers at CDC. So the dynamic in Washington is so interesting right now because Trump has yet to finalize all of his appointments for the underlying departments and their agencies. And so there are still a lot of career governmental bureaucrats that are there, maybe holdovers from the Obama administration, that rumor has it are oftentimes creating kind of a stopgap from initiatives getting passed. And this, it turns out, was their way of not red flagging certain budgetary items for Republicans in Congress. So if they avoid words like fetus, the Republicans in Congress might not notice a line item for, Planned Parenthood or something along those lines. So to think of it in those terms of that really broad dynamic that's happening.
And so this is still being, to the extent that it came out on Saturday, but it is still having ripple effects today. Not just because we're talking about it, but even last night. For example, I saw on Twitter, Kerby, the Human Rights Campaign protested last night in a powerful display projected at Trump's D.C. hotel some of these banned words on it. And what's so fascinating, it's not banned words. It's not this is common sense. I know when I talk to my mom or when I talk to my dad or I talk to my friends that there's certain words I don't use because I'm inevitably trying to get them to do something for me. So I know trigger words to stay away from, and I know trigger words to be able to try to get them to entice me. This is a budgetary proposal document that they're trying to stay away from particular words for because at the end of the day, they want money to be able to get their job. Am I right? This seems crazy.
Yeah, well, again, it's something that we've talked about with Chelsey and some other people around the table in the past. You go onto campus, and what are the students protesting? Well, they're protesting what they think they know, which is actually inaccurate. In this case, the protest last night was about what they believe in their heart of hearts, but not any of it is based upon any kind of factual evidence whatsoever.
If anything, they're outing their own their careerists that are already in the administration. It's drawing attention to something that I'm pretty sure the careerists at the CDC were trying to underplay so they could get their budget items passed on a maybe not Trump's agenda.
Yeah, exactly. And so at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is they're trying to communicate it in a way. And so when I think about this from even a biblical perspective, we understand that there are certain truths that we have to hold with a closed fist, and there's certain truths that we can open with an open fist. There are certain words that inevitably that we cannot utilize, or we must utilize rather, because they will inevitably be a stumbling block. And as Jesus' name is, he is a stumbling block. He is a closed-fisted issue. And so we've got to hold that with an open fist. There's no way to get around it. And so we hold it with an open fist. But there are other words, there are other ways to be able to utilize where there's room for compromise as well as creativity. I think that's the beautiful thing about what Paul did in 1 Corinthians 9. To the weak he became weak, to the Jew he became a Jew, to the Gentile he became a Gentile. Paul was willing to be able to exercise creativity all for the glory of God and for the good of this world. And what we see in the CDC is they're just trying to use creativity in order to get what they want.
Become all things to all people that you might save some.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And so we would love not only to be able to save some, but also we'd love to hear from you as well. What are you thinking on this? So you can call in at 800.
This is such a non-issue.
So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can log on to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And you can leave a comment or message as well. And when we get back after the break, unless we're taking phone calls or talking about this, we're going to transition out and kind of something very similar. Twitter is banning free speech. Are they really? What's really going on with Twitter right now? Just because we're continuing to see Twitter's trying to tamp down on some of this hate speech, as well as individuals that are mongering in fear. But is this a good thing? What should a Christian think about this? We'll find out right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, it is estimated that Charles Wesley wrote over 6,500 hymns. Perhaps his best-known hymn is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. Over the years, it has been edited slightly, but the meaning and theology remains as he wrote it more than 2 centuries ago. It begins with a proclamation of the birth of Jesus. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. The hymn reminds us why Christ came to earth. Jesus came into the world to bring peace, but many who sing this song fail to realize that it was to bring peace between us and God. Wesley's hymn reminds us that his birth was so that God and sinners could be reconciled. We are the sinners in this hymn, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have broken God's commandments and need to be reconciled with God. This was done when Christ died for our sins. This hymn by Charles Wesley goes on to describe who Jesus Christ is. Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time behold him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Pleased as man with men to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. This is the wonder of the incarnation. Jesus became the offspring of the Virgin's womb. God became man and was veiled in flesh, even though he was the incarnate deity. This Christmas week, let us all once again reflect upon the incarnation. How wonderful yet mysterious that God would become man and dwell among us, and that he would be willing to die on a cross for our sins. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View for this December 20th, 2017 day. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the roundtable today by Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute, as well as Kerby Anderson. And you can find out more about Point of View and some of the topics that we're talking about on pointofview.net. And kind of moving towards this second topic, just before we left the break, we were talking about how the CDC was banning words. Well, kind of similar to that, in kind of a weird way, but not necessarily just relative to words, is Twitter banning free speech. And so what was fascinating is what happened on Monday. Twitter administrators began suspending or closing social media accounts they deemed to be hateful, threatening, or glorifying violence, among them the accounts of prominent white nationalists who are calling the move a purge or an attack on free speech. And what's so fascinating about this is that Twitter set itself up at the very forefront in its founding as just a place that was going to be not only a beacon for free speech, but a free speech nation that champions free speech. And now, years later, it seems as though they're going back on that. And so inevitably, within the American experiment, for the American citizen, I have to ask our expert, Chelsey, is this Twitter doing something wrong, harming our free speech capabilities?
You know, this is actually a hard one and one I'm still wrestling back and forth with. But the truth is there's really no First Amendment implications. Private companies are not the government, so they can limit free speech as much or as little as they choose. So Twitter is not a governmental entity. You cannot necessarily sue them for invading your free speech rights or infringing on those rights. So that's the first thing to definitely make note of from a legal standpoint is really there's no free speech issue here. And then, you know, but on the other side of it, I got to thinking, and one of the reasons I read Twitter is starting this so-called purge is because they're down on membership. And they've found that a lot of members, they're a corporate entity, they've got to make money after all, that a lot of people aren't joining Twitter because of all of the slanderous things and hateful things that people say and comment to each other on social media. I am one of those, by the way. I don't have a Twitter account. I had to shut it down. I got too many comments from people and intimidating threats. So I understand as a corporate private entity that they have an interest in expanding their membership. They've really got a right to do that legally. And, you know, whether it's a good idea or bad, or whether people like it or not, it's a private entity. That's why we have competition in a market where other people can maybe introduce another platform that would allow more speech.
And again, like you, Chelsey, I have this back and forth because on the one hand, let's look at the big four, Apple and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. These individuals are so called a platform, I guess would be the best way to say that, but they're also content manipulators as well. They're part of the new media. So on the one hand, yeah, Twitter can decide what they're going to allow and Facebook can, but over the years we've seen that, for example, Apple said, well, we're not going to allow you to have a Manhattan app. We're not going to allow Dennis Prager's YouTube videos to be easily accessible. There is a sense in which they're free to do so, but these have become kind of the new media. So on the one hand, okay, they're a private company. They can do whatever they want to do. But on the other hand, it does still seem a little bit like First Amendment,
well,
doesn't it?
I think what you're getting to is the monopoly issue.
Yes.
And this is something that even, you know, Apple has been known to shut down pro-life apps or not accept pro-life apps and groups, which is obviously infuriating to the pro-life community and people who care about being able to use these platforms to speak their issues and speak their mind. And the answer to that is, I think, antitrust lawsuits. So for Congress to really investigate them, if they have a monopoly on the market, then
FTC kind of things?
Yes, and they owe it to the market to allow there to be some freedom of thought and idea, which is why I said I'm back and forth, because there are both of these issues at play. And not to mention the fact that, you know, and I recently heard a symposium on this, that think about it. Islam recruits, or the ISIS recruits their members through some of these platforms. And the security advisor who was with NSA said, at the same time, as bad as it is that they're able to use this so effectively to recruit, we're able to spy on their recruiting. Yeah. And so what my question was, on a broader sense, you know, what effect would this have on some of the security interests of the country?
Yeah, I think that's one of the fascinating things, because I go back and forth. So if I think about it from 50 years ago, I think that there used to be these things called gatekeepers that would hinder people or keep people from being able to speak on a big platform. And so you had to go through a publisher, you had to go through a particular newspaper editor, you had to go through some type of platform to be able to have your voice heard on a larger scale. Now, today, I mean, you just have to have a voice. You just have to have an internet connection, and you get a chance just to be able to do this. And so that filter that used to filter for quality is no longer there anymore. And it really is just kind of it's just a cacophony of voices now, for better or for worse. And what we've seen is that there's some good that comes from that. So if there was the media that swings to the left, as many suppose, now it opens up this broad opportunity on the right for media entities to be born. But also, for all the good that's being done on these platforms, there's also some wretched, despicable evil that's being done, i.e. ISIS right now on these platforms. So I kind of am in that mix right now, Kerby.
Well, again, I understand that, and a matter of fact, I've got a commentary that comes out a week from today that I've already recorded about that, because Jim Garrity was talking about the fact that these platforms were developed just to make money. They weren't really seeing themselves at the time as being news and information entities. They're just platforms. And so the example I used would be like complaining about a person that runs a printing press about what's being printed. Or it would be like complaining, the example I used is complaining to a college student playing music on the campus radio station saying, I don't like the lyrics of that song. Well, I'm just playing these. But they can't get away with that anymore, because they're the ones now actually making money. And again, they've got to decide, are they just platforms? And thus, because they're platforms, we can't guarantee what is there is true or accurate or helpful. And so then we'll eventually no longer acknowledge the value of social media, because we, after a while, learned that when we hear from a Nigerian prince that says he has $1 million, we know we don't believe that.
Well, eventually, some of us figure that out.
Yeah, but are we going to get to the point where we don't believe anything on social media? Mm-hmm. That's not good for them.
No.
Or are they going to then clean up their act? So on the one hand, saying that maybe we're not going to allow despicable, harmful kinds of things on our platform maybe is a step in the right direction. But again, I want to keep that concern that we have the Manhattan Declaration that couldn't have the app. We have Dennis Prager that can't play his YouTube videos. We have pro-life videos and undercover videos that can't play on YouTube. We have certain kinds of Facebook statements that cause them to get a timeout and not come back onto Facebook for 30 days. And so at that point, you start wondering, okay, on the one hand, we want them to be responsible like a news organization. Yep. But is political correctness going to take over, and eventually we don't have access as Christians to that medium of exchange and information?
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things that I'm just continuing to think about. And then, so Chelsey, it's kind of funny. So it's going to be irony of irony, because I saw this on Twitter, and it helped me to be able to think about this from a First Amendment standpoint. And so their understanding was Twitter can shut down free speech, but what about from the bakers? They're trying to make that analogy, right, for the masterpiece cake. Like, Twitter won't let some people speak, but then we're going to allow bakers not to be able to let some people bake cakes for particular people. Is there any comparison to that, or is the governmental piece to that? Because I know that you illuminated that free speech is a governmental thing.
It's truly the governmental speech aspect that I think comes into play, because the government, in the case of Masterpiece Cake Shop or our clients, the Kleins out of Oregon, there it's the government compelling their speech. So just like the government can't prevent you from speaking, they're not able to force you to speak a message you don't agree with. And so that's really the argument for the cake shop, whereas this is more of a private entity, a private platform, and I would say that truly, if there's kind of a slippery slope argument here that at this point, they're mostly just shutting down what I think is white supremacy groups and terroristic groups like that. But they could take it as far as they want. It could be anyone who has a religious view they disagree with. But at that point, I think it's up to the religious minority to find their own voice, create their own platforms, and the religious groups will find a way to connect on their issues and continue to express their issues, even if it's not on this specific platform.
Yeah, I think that's one of the commendable things, because, to a certain degree, Twitter's been doing this for a significant amount of time. I think probably about a year now, they've been shutting down some of these ISIS training or some of these propaganda accounts that ISIS has.
And 3 cheers for them doing that.
And they should be shutting these down. And so now we're just starting to see it, because they're reaching to another level now that's getting not necessarily home, but it's getting closer to home. And so at least it's in the state. I won't say it's in the neighborhood. It's just in the state. And that they're shutting down some of these white nationalist groups. What's going to be fascinating is, does it take the next step, right? Does it start coming out? Because we are a political people. Does it take that next step to go out against conservative groups? Does it take that next step to go out against Christian groups? And then that's when we're really going to have our ears open, as well as our innovative bootstraps ready, because we'll have to reach for new platforms. And so we are going to have to take one of those commercial breaks. But when we come back, we're going to continue talking about this, which is kind of very similar to what President Trump's national security strategy does, because he's defeated ISIS to a large degree. What we're continuing to see is, what are some of the steps that differentiate him from President Obama? And so we're going to be taking some of your phone calls as well, 800-351-1212, and as well as on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And we'll be back right after this.
Taylor has been listening to Point of View Radio for about 12 years, which is pretty remarkable considering today he's only 25.
In high school, when I first became aware of the political spectrum and all that, I was in conservative ideologues, basically, going with whatever conservatives said. But after listening to the show over the years, I realized that I'm supposed to be for truth. I'm supposed to be a Christian and then a conservative. And I'm supposed to look at all this that's going on around us in today's culture through a biblical lens. And I can't thank y'all enough for that.
The you Taylor is thanking is you. People like you are the heroes who have patiently invested in Point of View Radio and made it possible to shape hearts and minds across the nation, which in the long run helps to shape our future. And you can be twice the hero today, because we have a matching challenge which doubles your investment dollar for dollar up to at least $45,000. But you have to act. Please give at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Your $50 gift means $100 to us. Any amount doubles. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts for this December 20th, 2017 edition, this Millennial Roundtable edition. We've got Kerby Anderson that's joining us at the roundtable, as well as the Millennial, Chelsey Youman from First Liberty Institute. And for those of you that are wondering, just because after that hour break, we went and grabbed some chocolate cake. That chocolate cake has been devoured on my end. Apparently, it's against social faux pas for me to lick the plate. But I'm about to break some social conventions. It won't be the first time that I do. And so we'll be sure to
need to send you home with some.
Yes. It won't make it home because I'll eat it in my car in traffic, which will be dangerous. And I'm convinced that the most dangerous place in traffic is in traffic right now, especially during the Christmas holiday season.
That's for sure.
And so we're so thankful that you decided to join us today. And so we have been talking about everything from some of the banning of the words that happened in the CDC and how they're really not banning as much as it's just trying to position themselves well to be able to receive government funding. So these are not advantageous words. These would be much more beneficial words. And then we were talking about free speech and how Twitter is starting to shut down more and more accounts, and how they had been shutting down ISIS accounts for at least a year right now. And then now have transitioned starting on Monday to start shutting down some of these white nationalist groups as well. And then we're going to transition now. So we're talking about some of the stuff that's happening relative to ISIS. And then it's just an easy transition for us to talk about on Monday, President Trump unveiled his national security strategy. And so if you were interested, we posted a website on our website, so you can go to pointofview.net to be able to find more information on this. And there's 5 ways that President Trump differs from President Obama regarding the national security strategy. And what was so striking is just this: you continued to hear this wording called principled realism that happened from President Trump on Monday. And it really was a pretty stark difference from not just the past administration, Obama administration, but it really was a very stark difference from even the Bush administration. Right, Chelsey?
I think you hit the nail on the head. It was a complete 180 in my view from Obama's view of diplomacy and international relations to the Trump administration, like all other areas almost, it seems. And it's really interesting, I think, to look at this long term. Obama came across in his 8 years, I'll just say it, very weak on foreign policy. And the result of that was North Korea started building more missiles and making moves. Russia started invading its neighbors. And we really saw Iran start enriching more uranium, and they were allowed to start having their nuclear program further developed with the green light from the Obama administration. So kind of looking at the Obama administration, now granted, I'm obviously biased, but the view was that he was very weak, and he was all about diplomacy with some world dictators. Well, Trump has come out, and I can't believe there's just 5 things that are majorly different, but he's come out obviously very strong against calling Islamic terrorism what it is, using the name and saying, that he's going to refocus in the Middle East on ISIS and eradicating that. We know that ISIS has been virtually kicked out of Iraq at this point. Mm-hmm. So Trump has been really heavy pushing on that. He also talked about dumping climate change as a national security threat. We all remember when in 2015 when Obama said that climate change was the biggest threat to our national security. A lot of people laughed at that. I cried at that. But it is now off the list again and not even on the radar. And as you know, Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord. Mm-hmm. Which just goes to show that he's just refocusing the administration. And those are a few of the high points. Obviously, with his strengthening our allied relationship with Israel and talking about moving the headquarters back to Jerusalem. He also reiterated in the plan that Iran and not Israel is the truest threat to security in the Middle East.
Yeah, so again, we'll go back to that. And you can find those 5 differences on our website, pointofview.net. We've got that listed, so if you want to head over there. So, Kerby, let's just go one by one through this because I think there's just a lot to chew on here. So if we look at the first thing that's really highlighted in this, there really has been a renewed focus on the Islamic threat right now. Correct?
Well, I would think so. And recognizing that, first of all, if you have an administration that can't bring itself to say the words radical Islamic terrorism, then you're already going to have difficulty, because if you can't identify the enemy, you're going to have all sorts of difficulties. And let's be honest, certain presidents historically have been more interested in foreign policy than others. You've studied some of the presidents. Richard Nixon was fascinated by foreign policy. George Herbert Walker Bush was. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, not so much. Okay, I understand that. So that's right off the bat. But then when you actually feel like it would be politically incorrect to even identify and marginalize Al-Qaeda and ISIS, when you turn a blind eye, as we learned this week, to Hezbollah and some of the actions here, you're going to have the problem that we had under the Obama administration. And this was one of the reasons why Donald Trump, when he was a candidate, got some traction. One of the others we'll talk about in just a minute was immigration, but another one was just the idea of Islamic terrorism. And it seems to me that that has changed dramatically in terms of putting your efforts, your focus, and even your linguistics in the right direction so that you can actually identify who the enemy is and bring about some kind of defeat.
And I mean, that was manifested almost right out of the gate, right? Because I think about just how President Trump was willing, when Syria continued to go the way that it went. He said that President Obama had the line, and Assad continued to jump over that line. Well, then when President Trump laid down the line, he was willing to send a little friendly gift of 50 Tomahawk missiles that destroyed an airbase there. And so really, I mean, he was really to show, especially in that troubled, chaotic area there, he's trying to bring order. And one of the ways that you bring order is to be able to eradicate the enemy that's there.
Right. And he highlighted on the campaign trail, and he's still highlighting that now, that just increasing our military presence and power across the world is important to be able to fight all of these proxy wars. I mean, we're in probably half a dozen proxy wars at this time, which they're not formalized, but if we really want to maintain our status in the world, we've got to be a strong presence and keep our allies in the Middle East, especially Israel, very close.
That's true. So moving on to the second point, it's dumping, according to this, using their language, Daily Caller, dumping climate change as a national security threat. Now, that might be a threat. I mean, I hate a sunburn, just like with anybody else. I hate a sunburn. I hate sweating. But nevertheless, I drink my coffee too quickly and I start sweating, but that's not necessarily a national security threat. And that was one of the things that you highlighted, Chelsey, is just the fact that it might be a problem, but it's not necessarily the biggest problem that there is. And that's one of the things it seems as though how Donald Trump has differentiated himself from Barack Obama.
Yes, and I also thought it was interesting because Trump really unveiled a lot of his, I think, philosophical insight into foreign policy in talking about the climate issue. It wasn't just that he's not on board with, really doesn't buy climate change. It was really that he did not want the U.S. giving up its sovereignty, entering into all these agreements, and being a second-rate citizen in the world behind China and many other foreign entities. He really, it was all about sovereignty of our country and bringing back the power at home, and helping our economy at home first.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. It's not necessarily that it's always, I think the funny illustration that I always use is the idea when people say you're eating a sandwich and you decide that you don't want the crust of the sandwich, and they say, and there's always that someone in the group that says the crust is the best part. Well, the crust is not the best. It's a good part for some, but it's not the best. The best part's the center. We all know the best part is the center. Well, if we apply that, which would be a huge jump to the climate change, we recognize that climate change is a problem. There's some problems that we have. There's some room for us as Christians, especially those that have been called to cultivate and care for the creation. We need to pay attention to this, but it is not necessarily the top risk. Am I right, Kerby?
Yeah, and again, that's where I think people roll their eyes. Now, again, part of that came from Joe Biden and even back to the legacy of Al Gore, because even as I talk about this with other individuals that believe that climate change is an issue, and I'm not sure that I'm convinced it's as much of an issue as, say, Al Gore thinks it is. Nobody that has any kind of sense of propriety says that it's a national security threat. I mean, and back to the point Chelsey made, this is the first time in a long time that a president hasn't said, we're going to see what the international community has to say. I mean, you had George Herbert Walker Bush that talked about a new world order. Bill Clinton, he bought into that pretty significantly. George W. Bush backed off a little bit. Barack Obama back into it again. This is really the first president, really since Ronald Reagan, that has said, you know what? We are going to go our own way, and we're glad to be part of the international community, but we're not going to cede our sovereignty to someone else, and certainly not be tied down by a Paris treaty having to do with climate change and keep us from being effective and keeping us from being a world power.
Yeah, and so when we get back, when we come back after the break, we're going to be continuing to walk through this list, everything from Iran is the threat in the Middle East, and Israel is not our threat, and how we need to be closer to Israel, as well as the immigration component, which is just a pretty significant component. But if you have a point of view that you'd like to share, a question that you'd like to ask, you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212, or you can log on to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and you can ask your question or share your comment there as well. And so when we come back, we'll kind of walk through those two issues, and then hopefully we have enough time to be able to talk about selfie-itis, because I really want to talk about the idea that we're taking too many selfies and we got problems. We'll be back after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. The Washington Area Metropolitan Transit Authority, Metro for short, ferries commuters by rail and bus throughout the nation's capital. In addition to commuters, they also carry advertisements. And at Christmas time, those advertisements look very Christmassy. There are Christmas gifts pictured, lots of red and green, and not too few holiday puns designed to persuade you to buy stuff. The Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. also submitted an advertisement. It pictured a few shepherds and sheep under a starry sky with the message, "Find the perfect gift," scrolled artfully across the sky. At the website displayed in the ad, one finds out that the perfect gift is Jesus, quote, "the perfect gift of God's love this Christmas." But Metro rejected the ad. Macy's and other stores plying the Christmas theme were all right, but according to Metro, there are two halves at Christmas, the secular and the religious. Secular ads are okay, but all religious ads are forbidden. Yeah, Metro will take Santa, but not Jesus, 3 French hens, but not the 3 wise men. Even the president's own remarks at the recent national tree lighting could not appear on the side of a Metro bus. But that's not the law. First Liberty is submitting arguments to courts in Washington, D.C., explaining that what Metro is actually doing is called viewpoint discrimination, and is a type of hostility towards religion that the First Amendment forbids. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the roundtable by Kerby Anderson and Chelsey Youman, and we have been talking about national security, the differentiation between President Trump's national security strategy that he overlaid and outlined on Monday afternoon compared to President Obama. And we've got an article up on the website, pointofview.net, that you can find this article linked from the Daily Caller and differentiating factors between the two. And so during the first, right before it, we talked about how he's downgraded climate change and the threat to national security it is, to say the very least, and gave a renewed focus on Islamic terrorism, kind of radical Islamic terrorism. And then the third component, Chelsey, was something fascinating, that Iran and not Israel is the national threat, is our friend in the Middle East.
Yes, that is something that I think is also reminiscent of even the Bush era, Bush Jr. era, because Israel really is our strongest ally and democracy, established democracy in the Middle East. And we found that throughout the Obama administration, while Obama was happy to appease that relationship, he was also happy to appease Iran. And Iran is well known for backing terrorism and funding, outsourcing a lot of its funding to support terrorism. And then Obama, of course, a major staple of his tenure was to pass the Iran nuclear deal, which allowed them to enrich more uranium than they had ever been allowed to in the past. So Trump has now eradicated all of that and says we're doing a 180. We're going to hold Iran accountable in the Middle East for not only its actions supporting terrorism, but we're going to limit its ability to truly continue to develop its nuclear sites.
And I think that's one of the interesting things. I mean, it's not a secret that Iran does not like the U.S., nor do they like Israel. They quite literally chant "Death to America" in the streets. Quite literally, they have said, the Grand Ayatollah has said, "I want to push Israel into the sea." Now, he's obviously using figurative language, but he has a very clear stance on Israel. He wants the eradication of Israel, wants the death to America, but yet we enter into a contract with him. But what we continue to see is that President Trump, even as recently as this past week, Kerby, he has been willing to show that he's a friend to Israel through the recognition of Jerusalem as the council, as well as Ambassador Haley being able to stand up at the Security Council even just yesterday.
One of the interesting footnotes when you talk about Iran is there's been a concern that Iran might develop a nuclear weapon and explode it over the North American continent, or that North Korea would, and that would set an EMP, and it would destroy our energy system. And this last week, I think you had a friend or two that tried to fly through the Atlanta airport, and I think it illustrates only how vulnerable we are right now with our energy system. And one of the things that's sort of a footnote in this is he wants to do more to make sure that we have not only redundant systems, but protection, because we saw what happened when 30,000 people in Atlanta just were stuck in a black, dark, cold airport because of a fire. And now, again, it was an accident, but what if that was cyber terrorism? This is one of the other things that is part of this national security strategy.
And I got Bitcoin. We got to hold on to my Bitcoin. I'm just kidding.
But didn't you have some of your buddies get caught in Atlanta?
Oh, my goodness, yeah. So, really quick story. Buddies got caught in Atlanta, multiple flight cancellations. Then all of a sudden, they're trying to get out. But as you might expect, there's a ton of people that are trying to get out of the Atlanta airport. They finally catch a Lyft. As soon as they catch their Lyft, which is a ride-hailing app service, their hotel cancels on them, so they're having to run around Atlanta in the back of a Lyft trying to figure it out. The phone's ringing because there's other people that need to get places. They get in the back of another Lyft with another couple, and they're just chatting it up because they're just two great Tennessee guys. And all of a sudden, after this couple is about to leave out of their house, which is in downtown Atlanta, they knock on the window, say, "Hey, why don't you guys stay with us?" Because they still hadn't found a place. So all that to say, hospitality wins in Atlanta, as well as Chick-fil-A. But nevertheless, let's get to the very last point. Chelsey, differentiating President Obama from President Trump. President Trump now appears to be very hard on immigration.
Yes. Well, we knew that on the campaign trail. I think
that was no surprise.
Yeah, that was not a huge shock. The interesting thing is he's obviously made moves on this policy of his specifically already with his immigration, what they call the immigration ban, for lack of a better term, which the federal courts, by the way, have allowed to go forward. And so he truly has more mechanisms in place that he is planning to help keep security in our country high. And I think that to allow limited amounts of people in and to make sure that they're people with high caliber individuals with high records, which I thought this was interesting. The article also noted that the 2 terrorist attacks in New York were facilitated by Islamic terrorists that entered our country through Obama's plan, which allowed more access. And so those plans will be diminished, and Trump has recognized that publicly.
So very much a differentiation from President Trump and President Obama. And so if you want to see more of that, you can go onto the Point of View website, pointofview.net, to talk about that. But finally, let's talk about my last few seconds that I've got. Selfie-itis. Fascinating. So a new study has come out that talks about obsessive selfie takers. If you take at least 3 photos of yourself a day and post them to social media, you might have an acute case of selfie-itis.
And
Chelsey,
you might lose followers. I would never follow someone who posts that many pictures of themselves.
You post that many selfies, my goodness gracious. Why don't you take a picture? It lasts longer, Pee Wee Herman. But see, here's the average millennial dedicates 1 hour of every week to selfies. We're on pace to take 25,700 selfies a day. The Snapchat is composed, 75% of Snapchats that are sent in the world today, 74% of them are selfies.
Oh, is that true, Kerby? Is that what you're doing with Snapchat?
Every 10 seconds. Here it is. Every 10 seconds, there's 1,000 selfies posted on Instagram. We have a rampant plague of selfie-itis. What's going on with this, Chelsey?
Well, I don't know. Does the selfie cause the selfie-itis, or does selfie-itis cause the selfie?
Does selfie beget selfie? I don't know. Kerby, do you have selfie-itis?
I am not, and I do not do that, but I do see it all the time, and that every second, 10,000. Just get that number in your head. Can you even put your head around that?
Look, I almost wish middle school Chelsey could have seen herself a little more often because she needed some real help in the cosmetic department.
I did not need any help whatsoever. I probably would have broken about 10,000 phones if I would have had been able to take a selfie in middle school, because as my papa said.
But let's mention the name gene twinge.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Narcissism.
Yeah,
right?
Narcissism. The more you look at that screen, the less likely you are to be happy. My papa used to say that I fell down the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down in middle school. So I am glad I did not have a ability to take a selfie. But there's a couple of things that I want to make you aware of. And so if you're logging on Facebook.com/Facebook Radio, you're going to see me holding up a couple of magazines. We've got Outlook Magazine, which is the publication that's put out by Point of View Radio. And there is a couple of individuals that have written articles for this. Chelsey, this is yours. No, this is yours. Our school's a religion-free zone. Chelsey's got a great article in there, as well as Counting the Cost, talking about persecution. There's not a mediocre article.
It's a good Nick Pitts article.
They put together some
Each
good
one
words.
of you have done well. Very well.
So, Chelsey, thank you so much for joining us today on Point of View. As always, you have been phenomenal.
Well, thank you. It was really interesting. One thing I love about Point of View is just that we learn about so many diverse topics, and I'm now a Bitcoin expert.
You certainly are.
You are. And Kerby, what is happening tomorrow on Point of View?
Well, we're going to get into the whole question of tax reform, which we didn't really talk about today. I think there's a bill passed on that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so we'll get into that. We'll also talk a little bit more about theology, and during the Christmas week, we do some things that will help your Christian life. So that is certainly the case. And let me just mention that we also still have our matching challenge. That's something I wanted to mention, that we have been broadcasting for 45 years. That was before I was here. I've been here for 30 plus years. But back in 1972, Marlon Maddox started this out, and 45 years of broadcasting. And so we had Foster Freeze the other day say, I'll put down $45,000 for a matching challenge. And we're only about a week and a half away to the end of the year, and we're not even close to a third of the way down there. So we'll certainly need your response. So if you can help us out, we'd greatly appreciate it. Hope you have a good trip to Tennessee. Hope you have a good trip to Idaho. And I guess we'll see you back here tomorrow. Point of View.
We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Today, you can make a difference, but you have to act. Recently, Kerby sat down with a couple in California, Stan and Jennifer. Jennifer said, like many Christians, they were concerned about the direction of the culture, but simply hoped something would change. On one of her regular walks through the neighborhood, listening to the radio, she happened across Point of View, and before long, she was convinced wishing things would change was not enough. She began taking what she was learning and applying it and sharing it. She even went to the state capitol in Sacramento to stand up for what she believes. You would be surprised how much difference one Jennifer can make, and how many Jennifers you can inspire by giving to Point of View. Your gift today will shape hearts and minds across the nation, helping to shape our future. And thanks to a surprise donor challenge, your gift will be doubled up to at least $45,000. Give today at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Answer the challenge. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful program.